Tunganangala set up. Tunganangala set up, and the Anikasola Shaji charge, yes, I knew Betado, because yes, I knew Yam Chagita, Takasa, yes, I knew Yam Chagita to Zeka Luzen and Batch. Kulamu Chugu Dodge saw what the chick set up, and the Jew want Jamba, Tuga Hule. Tuga Yigisum set up, Tuga Hule was a part of Tuba Shingam Ishiba, only the Java gentleman, and Takacha Ishiba, Tobashayet, Naba gentleman. Tim Anikasa only on the Chula Machino, Mijuba Uchi, what is a commercial.
So we begin as normal too by setting up our meditation on the visualization in the space in front of the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, who is in essence our own world guru. He is one face of two hands, with the right hand in the earth-touching mudra and the left hand in the meditative equipoise mudra, holding an alms bowl filled with nectar. He is marked by the three syllables Om Hong. From the syllable Hong at the heart, light rays emanate, going out into the pure realms, inviting wisdom beings and the empowering deities. The wisdom beings dissolve into the central figure, and the empowering deities confer empowerment, the nectar of empowerment, some of which overflows at the crown, spontaneously producing the figure of Akshobhya.
What in the question, what the show, what the Yeshiva was shooting, and that to some Sanja Tamjak and Tani, and Lava to be on, but most of them to be Nanga show you something. Ranget Tawa to her, and it said the Pamane Cheve, and Taibe Magassim the Tam Jetta, Masan Navachen. Yes, and the Tedaya, and just to make national Kanchala, Namang of Mination, and it took to be Kusutu in the tension on the diet of Yacheta, what do we tell about the new commercial?
That we really try to think that the wisdom beings have indeed dissolved into the central figure, really empowering the Buddha, and the Buddha being kind of representative of all the Buddhas of all times, and that who is really there present. That also we have in the space all around us all kind of other sentient beings without exception. They also are from the different realms of existence, but capable of understanding this situation with the human intelligence, and therefore, like us, regarding the visualized figure of Shakyamuni Buddha with great reverence, with an understanding of the qualities of enlightenment, of developing the pure faith, faith of conviction, and the faith of aspiration.
What is commercial? What is it? Because at the touch of Tomala Mibetaba, Simjel Ninja, Simjel to make it Nasu, and comes with the Simjata to make it Nasu, to make to my Jue, Chabatu to Melian, Midiabachi, Ibate, and conversation, and tell me that Ninja. And Lama Tubia Ombogi, and it Narazu to the Tuja, Narazu to the Lamlap, and Mubats of a Sanja by Ibach, Narazu to the Mubats of a Sanja by Ibach. Rajiba Tanja was Shenjiba to the tablet. Kula to the Nirimot, Pentamata, Tamja to again. What are the Lishaka Mudu Tabati?
And so we then, regarding the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha with the mind of faith, and regarding all the sentient beings all around us with that mind of compassion, which is born out of an understanding of the whole realm of suffering, of the three kinds of suffering: the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and particularly pervasive suffering, which indeed induces the other two. And finding this kind of unbearable that sentient beings should have to go through this kind of suffering, we develop this sense of compassion, a real sense of wanting to do something about that. And that we, regardless of how much we have an awareness of that, we have an appreciation of the Buddha as being the kind of the master who, for our sake, generated the mind of enlightenment, for our sake, trained on the path, for our sake, developed full and complete enlightenment. And so this is the kind of quality of being and the quality of compassion that we require to really work for those sentient beings, a being who has no fear of suffering with regard to themselves, who have expertise with regard to relieving the suffering of others, who works for others with great compassion and without any bias, and who works for others or benefits others without ever expecting any benefit in return. And so we have to aim for that sense of that state of clarity and purity.
What simjeg tunge natula tana and Missube Ninja Takata Teta Tunge Juda Java Chana Chimara Chawa Chuja Chawa Shocha Chawa Lamatuba Umbichingi Lab so what the commission there was the subject that there was the Juda Chava Chana Chimara Chaba Chuja Chaba Shocha Chaba Tali the Genova Lamatuba Umbichingi Lab so what the said the chair and to the Pachata to check what the chair Taka was Kasura Takaja, and the Daka to make Judah Java targeting. There were Judah Java targeting us. And the Data Kasura Takaja to make Daka, there were Judah Java, Majava targeting us. And the Niri Chatani the Java, Java Shuja, Java Juja, Java, and Lamatuba over Chingilat. Yeah, and targeting us. That's also which Kasura, Kasura, but the Leg Kasura Takaja. Kasura, the and same game, that the summer down to that was a Chigato to Rodakaja Kasura, Takaja, was a Chigato to that, Simja Tamja, Simja Chiga, to make Tamja Java, Deva Tamja Devata, Devata, and Yirishatanya the Jawat. That Chamato, but the same was it. That did the lecture to a new one, the Sula to the Simja to the two Lamla, Mobazo, Sanjava, Konato. And Congo combined to one kitchen relay, give me to watch it. Takaja, Karin now in a subject dollar, my Jewish me too. Now the kind of subject dollar. Bezula Matova. What a delicious China, the lady by yourself, that Congo combined my daughter to a jigging something compassion.
So this sense of finding the suffering of all sentient beings to be unbearable, and therein the kind of like seed of our compassion arises, and that also we really want to develop that the sense of happiness for all sentient beings. So we're really praying, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and the cause of suffering, that all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, and to engage in the descending nectar light meditation in the context of the Buddha's blessing and so on, and to be able to provide that. And so it's kind of reaching that point of, may all sentient beings have this freedom of suffering and be endowed with happiness. May they have the happiness of non suffering and the bliss of liberation. May they have a sense of equanimity, free of attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant and so on. And you're wanting to say, I will be the one who will provide this. I will be the one who will do this for sentient beings. But it becomes so clear that the actuality of the situation is I can't even do this for one sentient being. So it's kind of like really crystallizing in our mind what sense of evolution of the mind is necessary to be able to kind of fulfill such aspirations. And that it is indeed in the figure of an enlightened being who, again, for all sentient beings has generated that mind of enlightenment, for all sentient beings have trained on the path, and all sentient beings has accomplished full and complete enlightenment. And that in each moment they have the capacity to ripen the minds of sentient beings that are not ripened, and to further ripen those that are in the process. And so we, and they can work without necessarily, having a conscious motivation for doing that. It's effortless, spontaneous. And so this is where we have to attain, to have that overall kind of power and capacity to work for all sentient beings, and really determine to attain the state of enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings.
what is what are the lesson? And what the name by the other check the Junju Shungla and it was some check with that Jumse de Chido, Sanjay Kumato Chido, Sanjay Kumatobala, and the Jaju Simbe Lava and Jaju Simbe Labja and the Casole Takacha. Labja Lava, you do that, Labja the Beshun Kabuta with the Juju Chati. And then the order Juju to some check over the is. What is conversation? What I say?
And to further focus that motivation here and now, it is in fact the central motivation for any study of the Bodhisattva's way of life. How we approach that through studying, contemplation, meditation, and all the wisdom that arises from that, that is all focused and channeled into the one motivation to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And that we understand that to attain that state we must engage in the trainings as laid out in this text by the Buddha and so on. And that this is the the king of such a mind training texts, and to bear that in mind, that it's such a powerful kind of inducement to be able to practice.
가서 차상와지 다 같이 가서다 차상와지 아니 냥도랑 도바 쇼스 왔다 그제 아니 가서래 다 같이 심절에 편토에서 산제 고바 두바쇼 그게 맛이 몽배 온게 심절에 녀바 이네 녀바데 페베교를 교와쇼 스카자 지금서 당 알아서 몽바 말이고 알아서 편토에 전에 뇌되기래 점점 알아서 교를 녀몽요래 녀몽요와 인사야 갑걸라 녀몽께는 녀바데 용거래 맛이 몽배오게 되는 임바에서 편배 삼로탄 심절에 편배 가서 딱 뭐시 주스는 심절에 편토에 교를 교와쇼스 랑게 룽아 유스인데 심절에 편토에 교를 교와쇼 뭐하지 아니 강토도 그제 아니 참참 야 편주에서 녀도와다 용미시바 말이야 딱 그때 녀바이네 녀바데 편배 교를 교와쇼스 뭐하지 녀바데 편배 교를 교와쇼스 어떤 뭐하지와이나 아니 파조들 편배 교를 좋아 용거로 와 먼저 삼삼 나라들의 냠용 연구다 지금 녀바도 소설 편토에 들어 연구도 와 왔다 단데 나라 쪽에 다 맛이 뭔가 지난 거 편바 맛이 두기 이내야 맛이 뭔가 오면 녀바 중앙 이바 있나야 심지어 감도 몇번 나서 버려 엔지는 릭질은 편바도는 녀바 용서를 야 소설 녀몽 시험도 주바 이바 있어 갑가는 녀몽을 녀바 용서 그래 녀바디야 심지어 패배교를 교하쇼 뭐하지도 쉽게 해 버려 그래서 발로 장미
And so therefore this engaging in the Bodhisattva's way of life in this way is so important to set our motivation to very, very clearly make it a motivation for the benefit of all sentient beings, that we're engaged in this training of the Bodhisattva, which is here in a complete, and then may I be able to, live up to the ideals as presented in this text in such a way that, that I can be a benefit to all sentient beings, but in particular, that I may be able to return benefit for harm. If any sentient being through their confused mind, their afflicted sense of mind harms me, that I should have an understanding of that, and just simply I wish to return benefit for such harm, that we have well enough experience ourselves through the mistakes we have made through this confused ignorance of and allowing the mental afflictions to hold sway within our minds, kind of actions that we engage in. And so we should give that consideration to all other sentient beings, that even in a situation where they engage in harm like this, that we return the benefit for that harm. It's very, very important that
나라도 맛이 뭔가 녀바 용거야 심지어 감도 몇번 나서래 녀바 용거 녀바디야 심지어 코로나 패배교를 주었어
그래서 And so on top of that also that, because of our own confusion, that we may proceed to think that we're benefiting another, whereas in fact, we're only engaging in some harm, unbeknownst to ourselves. So we also, make the prayer that not only that I can return benefit for harm, but that even in the situations through my own confusion that I harm another, and may that in some way be of benefit, may it be beneficial to the other. And so we make this kind of strong dedication that we're really, dedicating all actions of body, speech, and mind in this regard, and making a powerful kind of dedication to based on our own experience, that even in situations where we don't do the right thing through our own ignorance, that it can somehow be beneficial.
Today, also Yabu Yonda, Duja Yong said, Gui covered it. Gui Yabu Java, then Debu Yabu Jungre, to Duja Jona, Debu Duja Jungre. Today, in Bazata, Gui covered Subsub Javaina. Subsub Jebu Pusum Sawajila, Juticate, and it took Bezin Javaina. And Jebu Kala Rayomar, Debu Yabu Jonga, but touch of it. Because you Pusum Sawajama, Debu Pusum Sawajungre. To the that Matiba Jebaina and Debu the Matiba Jungle to Nadam subsub check what you color. Jebu color around your money. You can you to talk about the devil around your money.
And so in terms of good and bad, when whichever we're aiming for, that we have to care for the causal element of that path of action. It's so important that we concentrate on making that cause good if we want to experience an excellent result. That's very, very important. That it's not really much point in bewailing the fact when the result is already, manifesting. There we have no power over that situation. But at the causal part, that's where we need to concentrate on. If we want good results, we must put the perfect causes in place for those results.
Table complement that Duga Junga never table the Junga, Tabjita Yomata, Kari Tapsi Yorsata, Table Duga Junga de Ya, church of a twinkle Pejita, Tapsi Yore. Timothy Duga Mayola Tapsi Mindua, you get your sort of that Kari Tapsi Yorsana. Duga Junga de Debu Dunga Junga invited, and the church of a twinkle Pejita Yogure. Debu Deva Junga, the church of a twinkle Pejita Yogure. Diremando called Debu Dilla Juata Yomari. That could you subset was a Guicar subset.
So it's at the causal stage that we must be very, very careful to lay down the correct causes in the correct way, and that at the point of the result, we don't have any means to alter things. Then it's too late. The cause has already reached fruition. That's the only thing we can do if it's a cause that is not wanted, that we somehow take it onto the path, make a dharma action out of that cause. But as far as influencing the cause itself, no, that ship has passed. And so therefore we must always be aware to put all of our attention, really be extremely careful when laying down the causes for whatever we aspire for.
That's cousin some the Hawaii.
Shokran the Gyatang Gyupshi Gila de la Cosa Somba, Chamber Tangshe Shingi Sam.
Oh, yeah, that cousin some about you doing that. That kind of the Shishin Sue Liu, Chadera, and what the Liu, Shishin Sue Liu into that can judge Suba Jambata, Shishin, Samsung, Jobala Lab, Sudela, Sum Jenna. Gasa Dombe Tsuchim, Nejula Dombe Tsuchim, Dombe Tsuchim, Nejula Dombe Tsuchim, Gawachudu Tsuchim, Simja Jigu Tsuchim, La Lopsilos, what Lopsilos, such a subject. That and what the Gasa the Nejudombe Tsuchim de la Nichen, Gosung Kuju, Dabala Pevachi, Gosung Kuju, 마다와 저는 다와라 배주지 아니 그때 고수 군주대 다 지금 먼저 내다 보이서 냐마 용거와 냐마 저는 냐마디 냐마 다 냐마 요는 냐마 송아 워저 sabject 다 당보된 고수의 고수의 군주대 다와 라 배바텔라 숨제는 류가게서 군주라 다와 생겨 군주라 다와 아니 그 난가게 자외가 샤바 워저 sabject 오다 숨제 다나고 류가게 군주라 다와텔라 시제는 류게 자외 뭐도 꿀로라 다와다 류게 자외 뭐도 꿀로라 다와체 아니 다와소다 제외 납자 다와소다 제외 납자 아니 졸람 샤라 자와 아니 내배 군주라 다와 워저 오다가 sabject 시제 다 당보 다 당보 류게 자외 뭐도 꿀로라 다와텔라 다 자와래서 다 뒤지 마소야
So we have been looking at the chapter on alertness, and that we had stopped at a point here, the third outline, talking about how to train in the behaviors of protecting the mind through mindfulness and alertness. And this has three subheadings with regard to related to maintaining ethical conduct. So how to train in the ethical conduct of restraint, and then secondly, how to train in the ethical conduct of accumulating all virtuous dharma, and thirdly, how to train in the ethical conduct of working for the benefit of sentient beings. And the first of these has two further points, that is the ethical conduct of restraint. And these are, one, the effort that is put into all pure actions of the three doors. And the second of these points is protection when and if the mind degenerates. The first of those has a further three subheadings. Logically enough, an analysis of all actions to do with body and speech. And secondly, an analysis of all actions to do with the mind, mental actions. And thirdly, what to do and not to do depending on the circumstances. And the first of those, that is all actions of body and speech, has four headings. That is an examination of our motivation prior to any physical action. Secondly, some advice connected with how we should look, in other words, our eye, where we should place our eyes and our gaze. And thirdly, applying this to all other situations, and then an examination of how our behaviors should be when we are sitting or when in place or staying in one place.
다 간제제 당보 다 가서데 그래서 루기 자원권도 군로라 따바텔라 다 간제 레시 당보 된데스 되네 견제 셰제는 대제 다게 신신도 송도 받는 내가 잤어.
So the first of these, dealing with these four kind of mini headings, that is an examination of the first of these is the examination of our motivation prior to any physical action, is dealt with in verse number 34, which says, when, just as I am about to act, I see that my mind is tainted with defilement, at such a time I should remain unmovable like a piece of wood.
사회 가버이네다 예배 가버이네다 저도 줘봐 근데 지금 이네 이걸 꿀론 제가 딱받제네 딱받제네 뒤 최다 두바 책도 책문도 저기 계획 책도 책문도 어디 녀모 줄을 저것도 저거문도 와다 되게 제네 아니 로다 페나 차잖아 좋아서게 답에나 저 저거요나 좋아서 소다 소군을 좋아도 오와다 대바다 가이네 불어 사와도 가이면다 속에서 Reshi Tambo Rangula Tane, Sosu Gula Tane, take Nomu Gula Togudu Tumudo Tane, Nomu Tunge Jagudu Chagman, Nomu Tuigi Casota, Tunge Jagudu Chagmo de Tane, then there was some dinner, Gungendo, the little child Togutuna, take you in Takaja Casada Tane, then there was some day, Gunjeda, Gunjava and Ota Gun the Java water. That dinner or that game about Takajiman or Tata Risha Santa Nomongi as a Tungela Majoja, Kakan Toguto, or that game at number Sheva Jenny. Sheva Rangi, Doa in the Dova in the Save Cabineta, and Neve Cabineta, Candidata, Nomongi Ken Togu to Sheva Jenny. And the Sheva Jeneta, Roman, Drome about the Sheva Chen. Togu, you know, Togu about the Motoba Jenny, and Kulon, Gunja the Julwayina. That is a Nebu Sing to the Never just stop, the Chola Mandova Jen and Takajaji Casodeta. So I can't never sing that she never chose soon to. But never chose what the less net to achieve this. That girl, my Chola Patutuna, that you two would never be shook some words and let the Gutuna. No more shook some words on Tagara Casoda, the net, Takajoja. Kaya Swami of Genten. What else they would have done? Come to the Chicasode on the Tutuna, on the Tuneta, Casode, no more maybe Chola Casode. On the Tutuna, the two genta, give maybe Chola di Genta, Genetiro. That dinner, come to the dinner of them and what you Swami of Gen. Sing that she gen. Nevertheless, that is Rangi, the Kabla, the because of the rank come to me, that can just go to not because of the Nomu Data, because of the Chuda Tumba, Nomu said no dash about it. That the Jemma the Colossus to that, and Swami about the netage, Tito Percasoda, Doname of Genta, or the Shinglish never to the suicide.
And so this verse is detailing certain tactics to employ when we engage in this process of examining the mind. You know, how is the motivation of the mind prior to engaging in any action? And so it's here, you know, this is regardless of what we are doing. You could be doing anything. You could be going or coming or staying or eating or drinking or whatever you're engaged, whatever action that you're engaged in. We should really get in the habit of examining the motivation for that action at the outset, you know, to kind of go, just have a quick look in the mind to see, is what I am about to do in accordance with the Dharma? Is it a virtuous activity? Do I perceive any obstacles to this activity? Are there kind of like, or is it tainted by mental affliction, etc., etc.? And so it's saying here that, you know, you do this examination in the mind stream, and then you can say whether it's tainted or not. You know, maybe there's some fault within your motivation, or maybe it's pure motivation. It's up to you. You really are able to tell. If it's faulty, say that one option is to remain like a piece of wood, and that is you are now unresponsive to that afflicted element in your motivation. You are not paying any attention to it. You have no feeling towards it whatsoever. Now, this might be the case where you have.
No, this is Pena Joy the new to Chigana Joy the Bakasha. Pena Joy the new to Chigana, Joy the Zamshan. Gash sings it never just. Pena Joy the similar new to Imbaina, and the Zamsha sings it never just. What the label.
So maybe that, like, for example, if you're going, if you're moving, if you're on the run or on the go, then if you see that there's some fault in the motivation, then halt, stop, remain like a piece of wood. It may maybe have that connotation as well. It's also relevant to point out that, you know, depending on how powerful that afflicted element of your motivation is. You know, in other words, if the motivation is very powerful, that this is maybe the best tactic to just withdraw like that and remain motionless like a piece of wood. But otherwise, if it's, you know, from your own experience, you can tell it's just something you can do about it. If you can apply any alternative antidote to the fault in the motivation, then that's what you should do to overpower it. It depends on your own disposition to what extent certain mental afflictions are more or less powerful and difficult to deal with. That comes from your own experience.
Yeah.
So, for example, you know, if you're moving or going somewhere with the intention of harming, for example, then you know, you have the option either to stop what you're doing there, or you know, you have the capacity to transform that motivation, to actually say, rather than going to cause difficulty, I'm going to benefit in that situation, and make sure you bring a beneficial motivation with you. So that the key point in this verse is really to really become very accustomed to examining the motivation at all times, and that one can become very proficient at doing this. One needs just a moment to see what is going on in the motivation and to adjust if necessary. And so this is important because of the fact that sometimes we engage in so many actions sort of unknowingly, with not enough awareness brought to what we're doing, and that can lead to fault and mental affliction and so on. And so this is counteracting that way of accumulating negativity, that we are really aware of our motivation for whatever we do. Now, the second of these outlines is dealing with advice with regard to how we look, the particular aspect we have where we use our eye sense. And it's clear that much of this advice is most relevant for those who are renunciate, novices and so on, as to how to conduct their behavior. But of course, it's absolutely relevant to everybody, because everybody needs to be highly aware of the presence or not of mental affliction in the mind. And this is the job of examining our motivation. And so this is still very, very relevant to what our needs are. So these 4 points that are going to be looked at with regard to how you use your eyes. So here is the general advice on all actions with regard to how you use your eye sense. The second is when one is extremely tired, what to do. Thirdly is what to do when another person comes into your presence. And fourthly, what do you do when you're actually taking a break?
어디 다 가자 미기 따위에서 구조 지점 받을 다 가자 때마들 다들 다 당부들 미기 따위 구조 지점 받을 당부네 자월래 되면 영화 따와네 남야 다그 미자 네버 셈베 따도네 미니 법대 따와 자스.
And so the first of these is general advice on all actions with regard to how we look and see. 35, never should I look around distractedly for no purpose. With a resolute mind, I should always keep my eyes cast downwards.
어디다 되면에 초소서 예와 따와네 뒤남야 미자데 뒤남야 다 그래서 미자데 셈냠버주레스 다 셈냠버주레스 셈인네 셈냠버주레스 다 되네 이제 계획 초라 녀버 셈베 뒤다도 네 다외체 녀신 강점도 미게 법대 따와 자고서 다 가지 다做디 랍도 줘야 두엘랍잔 다 두바절 송부도 어디를
And so here saying again, for mindlessly, pointlessly, do not be distracted and look around constantly, never engage in that sort of activity, because that leads to degeneration of the mind. You said to really try to maintain, focus on virtue as much as possible, have a definite mind with regard to that, so keep your mind like that, and to keep your eyes cast down as if you were wearing a yoke, and to kind of maintain that for as kind of in terms of being a novice monk and so on, to kind of how do you say, curb your inclinations and discipline the mind.
다 이내 다就是그래서做랍도 중앙 시샤자 마송고 어디를 때 이내야 다 개치셔대 술라 때와 임바 이내야 아니 저기 가서는 녀모마게 와체다 개치 도다디 녀모마게 와체도 송고요 녀모 깬지고 요바서 마게 와체도 송고요서 아니 녀모마게 와체 왔다 이제 셈제 라 때와 이내 아니 될 때는 랑게 가서는 최주배 튕겨를 주줘야 될 때는 장바게 인제게 왔다 셈제 탐제기도 산제 고마 두비 있어도 두개 있어야 술에서 왔다 딘둘라 때네 딜라 때는 산제 다 딘둘라 페버 두배치도 두개 있어 산제 고마 두개 수위체도 두고 어디도체도 같이 지금 수통화 있네 랑게 잠바 야제 줘야 인제 야제 줘야 장주에서 마제와 개와 관대 페르 데레 추트베 튕겨를 두고이나 다 미다발이 경 가요 말이야 다디 멤버체네 지금 가서 녀모게를 저는 다 녀고요 봐. 다저 녀모마게 쳐도 임바이자 다 개치지 가르스나 최주베 튕겨를 용해쳐도 다 배주당 두가지 아니 개치슈데 다야 lumba 소소 조당 근데이나 조당 투바데 개치무라 밀라다야다 제데 pen 치게 lum바이나 기제시데 미 동라 때니 기제 시험과도 코라 lumba 조당 좋아 오다 디다 투바 임바이네 야 꿀롱거 차네 차바게 되자게 되는 멤버처럼 꿀롱거 차네 아니 저기 잡아 야제 줘야 인제 야제 줘야 녀모마게 토라때는 오다 되게 돼 아니 심정이 딘디에 오다 된데 저는 간자 저기 계획초 공도 페이지 중앙에는 아니 간에 켜봐 요 말이에요. 나 개취 들어와다. 최두에 튕겨를 줘도겠지.
So, of course, it's clear that in this kind of advice, the main objective is to prevent mental affliction arising, to kind of sustain certain behaviors in order to avoid mental afflictions arising. And this, of course, is irrelevant to all of us. And but from the other point of view, being proactive about it is that if we're able to sustain the positive motivation of using every single encounter we have to further our compassion, to further our love for all sentient beings, and recognizing that whoever we are with are those sentient beings that we're constantly praying to and praying for. So it's kind of makes it a very personal and pertinent encounter each time, that therein is always the opportunity to increase my love, to increase my compassion, and that to see all sentient beings in that situation. And if that is a motivation that we can maintain, and indeed from that, our actions of body, speech, and mind are always virtuous, then it becomes less relevant where, in what direction our eyes are looking. That becomes no longer the important point. And so we have to really engage and so on. And indeed, it's part of the culture of a country is that that maybe we, to encounter other people, to engage with other people, to have conversations with other people, etc. So as long as our motivation is solid, as long as we go to meet other people and we encounter other people and talk with other people with a motivation that is not tainted by attachment or aversion, but rather that it's kind of completely imbued and suffused with love and compassion and recognition of the kindness of sentient beings, etc., and that this sentient being in front of me right now is one of those kind sentient beings. In other words, to keep our thinking on the side of virtue, then it becomes less relevant where we are looking.
nga sanje goma thobati an dilatene thogu yores semje thamjela tene thogu yores dilatene thogu res wata ga je rangi sanje goma juyi bach rangi jamba de ningje juyi bach rangi jamba de ningje tunjen yin bach ta ro wa de ge goma shene ani je jamba de ningje kwane phataye zewe kwane taye wata de yongchogu wa yongchogu wata de chen ta ga je
So, whoever we see that person is the one on the basis of which I get to enlightenment, that they are that important. And so therefore, we look after gaining through those sentient beings, through that sentient being, I can lay down the causes to attain enlightenment, such as an increase in my loving kindness and compassion, and so on. And so this is the motivation, this is the compulsion that I have for encountering other sentient beings, that they are that kindness.
탐제 기본 고바이네 딜라테네 두베 이도다 랑게 디기 탐제게 아니 싱사라고 해도 안 디도 와 자치 뭐 쉬우지
so
아니 심제 탐제라 이신 노벌레라베 돈저 주면서 다도 제발 좀 쇼서 다들 기실랑리 탐제 송에 다가라도 달려 되고도
so to be able to see all sentient beings and the sentient beings that we encounter as the basis of all my happiness, to understand that they are the basis of my happiness in a future rebirth as a celestial being or a human being, as in my attainment of liberation, and ultimately the attainment of the omniscient state of enlightenment. And so that this sentient being is representative of all sentient beings is so unbelievably kind in that regard, and that they provide me with this opportunity. And as we recall from Geshe language Tangpa's 8 verses of mind training, that sentient beings are even greater than a wish-fulfilling gem. And this is why. So it's not just every sentient being, but each sentient being is greater than a wish-fulfilling gem. So when we train in that mind state, then for each sentient being, even prior to meeting them, we already have an inbuilt sense of respect and appreciation for them.
치료고 유거래지 뭐야 될래요. 지금 차단기에 뭐 요바 인사 아니 차단의 마게 받잖아. 마제바다 아니 차단 시외게는 줄배주 당도가 제죠. 와다들이 이면도 아니 지금 셈 인외团에 다와 마인바자 셈 마인외团에 셈 마인바서도 다셈 아니 저 가서데 계획 미과다 투배관에 다 가지지 유了大业유了龙节 와다들이 수고도 와서 개치시럽데
So it's so important that we even move beyond sentient beings with regard to this prerogative that we can have this sense of easily develop attachment and aversion to objects and so on as well. And so with that, we have to be aware that in situations like that, that we can easily transform those, tainted mind states into a virtue, into something virtuous. And so it's all about sustaining the focus on virtue without distracting into a non-virtuous state.
다 니바 두베스 지다 자와서 다 어디 레슨을 다 냐신강 밤에 이래서도 간자잖아 당치그라 깔레카그와 다들도 아니 깔레카도 갈지 그래서 다 니바 두베스 지다 자와는 자war래 다왕예수 체도네 랭가 쳐서 다와자서 왔다 가자체 왔다 다 미밤에 다와서이 제 어느 두나 다 깔레카서나 예수의 체도 랭가 가사다 랭가 아서 미데 초서 다와자서 랭가 다 그 초서 파 그 강대 수의 체도 왔다 파초다 다 가지 미밤에 조금 집에 있나냐 그 밥업자는 같이서 당체기로 와 사회주도 다 예수자를 설정해 다가 어디를 전 다디 이 당체의 라이서 어디를 딱 네, 다 뒤서 잡도 좋아 시작적 수고요. 이내다 가져 송고의 거바데다 지금 녀몽게 깬도 먼저 해체도 수고요. 와. 녀몽 깬도 먼저 해체도 좀. 다 이내다 가르 통화 이내 최대의 통계를 배주 당도가 이내는 안 대성 다 개체 몸도 와. 통계를 배주 당고做的 류기 된데 제디 개체 몸을 다做的 녀몽 마게의 임바 인사 녀몽 마게의 임바 인사 다 뒤송고요. 호텔 당 어디 가서데 미팜 딱 말와 야스 자고 말이 거기서 10 direction 딱 두고
So the next point is very quickly following on from making sure that your eyes are gazing down, like as if you're wearing a yoke on your neck, is to discuss what you should do then when you're exhausted, as Kenna points out, because if you're going around like that, you will get exhausted. So you need to kind of relax and what to do in that situation. And so here it says, but in order, this is the first half of verse number 36, where it says, in order to relax the gaze for a short while, I should look around. And that, so this is saying to kind of raise one's eyes and to have a look around just in order to take a break. And of course, again, to point out that this is primarily aimed at renunciates and that to curb their physical behaviors and so on. And that this is we look on it with the broader sense of actions that can be adopted in order to prevent the arising of mental affliction. And this is the main thing. And of course, if we can use any of this advice as conditions to be proactively engaged in virtue, one or kind or another, then that supersedes that particular physical action. And so the main idea is that yes, that with regard to physical actions, that we prevent mental affliction from arising, but more important than any physical constraint is the fact that we don't allow mentally the mental affliction to arise, and so we're able to keep our mind on virtue. So again, I said, after all, like, who wants to keep their mind, the body kind of, or their head bowed down for so long? We're much more inclined to be looking in the 10 directions.
다 간제 어디를 전다 개치들에 다 지금 미팜의 저거 이내 랑이 셈 양 가르치고 도나 맞잖아. 야 너무 개념가 여러 nga do ziba shimchule tingre misu is ya yang ka so le tam dong de nye je nyanga duwa right ben mi pam ni pe ji shi duwa ya go shi wo ji le bi chan ya go shi ji duwa yin ba yin na ya su su sem le je ba ya go ma je na ya nyomo ge gu ga yor ba ya nyomo tung mu duwa misu nga nyamle ba ya go re tingre 야 요에 년가 도와 딱까지 거두이네 르기 줘봐 대 장배 쳐를 줘야 년가 먼저 와 쳐를 자제 자다바 타 줘야 그 가서데 타 줘봐 레먼도 와야 딜레 때네 야 녀모 셔바 게 그거 도와 근데 저 거두이네 아니 랑게 셈라 제바 맞제나 야 배나 가서데 고팝 전 장을 뭐 야신 가서 밥 아니 인터넷에 배 지금 다 가져려다 르르 추고 남섬 고연전다 지금 오늘에는 시도와 야고 전에 표와 임바 이내야 답변은 르 그저 전에 표는 셈을 제바 맞잖아 미스고 나 결론 삐다고 시우스레 땡그래 땡그여리 승소를 되네야 랑게 남도 차례 남도 서다 타면도 야 제바 맞잖아 야 녀모 계획이 구감지 다가제 기시 뱅군제네 시제 제바 지금 고도 근데 제바 지금 만은 녀모 고좀 물어봐
So you can see also when there is an overemphasis on our kind of physical actions in a certain context, that may in fact open the door for mental affliction as well. So that you're going around, you consider these particular restraints, constraints of the body, and all the instructions with regard to how you hold your head and so on as extremely important. And then you get the idea that this is the kind of very aspect, the acme of humility, and so you spend all this attention on how you're walking and how you're holding your head and how you're holding your body, but you're not checking on your mind to see what kind of motivation is going on there, and that in a situation like that, you may well start to get the idea that you're some kind of, exemplary practitioner, and that there's no kind of guarantee that can be 100% correct, especially if you're allowing the mind to go on checks, where we realize how sly and insidious the mental afflictions are, and they can creep into your mind, and that you can start getting involved in the reputation side of the practice and thinking, oh yeah, this looks good, this must look really good, I must look like a really good practitioner, I am, and so on. And to kind of like, I'm a great, fully ordained monk here, the very look of it is fantastic, and all you're doing is just creating an opportunity for mental affliction again. And so be very aware. It's kind of very dangerous situation. Indeed, in that situation, you need to have the sense of vigilance, as Geshe Ben Gungyo
또 그 담som 개첨부 지금 질 직된 바스기 열봐. 직된 바스로 다 개첨부 지니 저대지. 다 되네 임바 인자 다 쳐봤어도 아니 가르스 고거스나 다 아니 저기 최주에 지게 아니 저기 또 그 담som 게 고코로이나 아니 추를 개겐 지게나 아니 또 그 담som 아니 질라 개첨부 마지는 발려 당게지 고고 열봐. 이네데 또 사기면 tam gogo mare sigo ma dila go ma ko ke go ma ko ke ine da so semla chewa ya bo ma chena go la ya jonggur du lo be ha ba ja jo du lo jo bu shu de de gun tu che be le dang da ga ne shen ge ga se to la ya jong dang che ne ane be diu ju ne 자고 데데게 에네 데데게 롱체네 에네 칼라자로서 삼모고 쳔네 오 데데게 배주당 이나야다 땀들려 마도 와체네 오 미수가 가 냠내 봐 야고 쉬우스레 땡그레 와 검체 봐 야고 쉬우스레 땡그레 어때 데데게 식감보체게 에네 랑게 미식가 깔레 잡아다 톨라당게 도와 그래서 땀 데데 찍다 디 녀보세 때 마도 봐 이나 때 마도 봐 이나 어제 땀 위에 마요 계자마라 땀을 고코래 세 위에 마요 세라 고코래 돼 로아도 그 위에 마요 계자마 그 야보 거니까 그걸 고하고 왔지 세 야고 살아 그야마 세라 고하고 왔지 뒤 취를 개그만도 왔지 땀 여발 그마 땀 들려 되는 랑그 취주에 개개만도 왔지 직대 취경도 봐서 뒤 좋아이나 취 많이 맞춰도 와 안디 자다 그 뒤에 제바 제디 개치모도 와 직대 취계 차와 이바이나 아니 치매 된다 누구요 말이야. 치매 된다 뭐를 취하거나 자고보다 다 택바 처음에 취다 파쇼. 취했다면 차 두고면 도와. 기분 충분히 취했다면 차 두고면 도와.
So it's just supposed to show really that at all times we must be on our, how to say, on the lookout, being fully aware for any presence of what are known as the 8 worldly concerns. And that it's certainly for sure that if we don't engage in this constant checking of motivation, that those 8 worldly concerns are certainly capable of taking kind of control or infecting our lives. And so, as they say, those who are mostly concerned with food, clothing, and reputation are worldly. They are the worldly ones. And so here, it means that they are kind of deceived by the necessity, the attachment to these things. And so what we are advised is to give up on that sense of deception, to give up on that attachment to any of those things, that in terms of clothing, that you have the set robes, you don't crave for anything else, you have satisfied with what you have, even if it's just rags joined together, that you have also just in terms of food, you are satisfied with what you're given, what you can get. Again, you don't dominate your thinking with the need for this and that ingredient. But particularly, you have to be on your lookout for a reputation, for being deceived by the allure of a reputation. And so even the idea, that, they will think of me as a great practitioner. They will think of me as a great meditator, etc. So if you are infected by this kind of thinking, you really have wasted a life of so-called Dharma. You have been deceived by the mental affliction of reputation, of really craving reputation. And so you have to understand that that is kind of really a disastrous situation to be in. That of course, we need food. Of course, we need clothing. Of course, too, reputation is a good thing, and to have a good reputation is a good thing. What is being emphasized here is that we are not deceived by the notion of reputation. That is a very, very important distinction to be very clear on. That it never becomes an obstacle to our Dharma practice. That it never conjoins with the 8 worldly concerns, because if so, we can say that we aren't, whatever we're doing is not going to benefit our future aspirations and future lives. It can't even be counted as spiritual practice. So it's very important to see then that this particular chapter is well titled, and focusing on mental alertness and mindfulness in order to do this analysis of our mind, of our internal world, of our motivation, to examine the mind constantly, to be able to determine that we are firmly focused on the side of virtue. Because if we don't engage in that, we may be rendering all of our so-called dharma as non-dharma. And so we can see in many texts, and not just here in the Bodhisattva's way of life, but there are many instructions as to how we hold or use the body. And here it's important, of course, but more important is how we set the mind. This is more important. And so they should always kind of go together, to avoid mental affliction taking hold, or even the semblance of mental affliction arising, that we always set the mind before we engage in any action with the body, and they should both work together like that.
Geshe miglam nanjuna tene on lecture chesa and lamso chigwa tagbeche yanda yanto choshita that gasoleta gacheche yashin kanza ma pabne batan pian do su yorwata what the chat that share kibu gashe ke migel lamdo nawa gyuchi tambi toyina ana dundo on until zubata tene so on lecture ta kan gasoleta Hello, see your what I did not share job Alex, share job at all. And so young lambda to say that the Chigua use a lambda than the Yorba up in Yamanata, Shinam Buja, the Jessica Chiguata with the Truta, then the Chiguata with the Yovaina, part of diet. You met Davicher, Yanda Yang to Choshi Tower. Chawas and Nova Mayo, get you in Bensa, what the leg. So what is that?
So it continues again with how we should place our gaze, etc. This is then the third of those subheadings, that when we come into the presence of another person, then how should we behave? Again, the end of verse 37 and the beginning of end of verse 36 and the beginning of verse 37, where it says, "And if someone appears in my field of vision, I should look at him and say, welcome. To check if there is any danger on the path, I should look again and again in the four directions." And so this is, as it states there, that if see somebody appearing in our line of vision, and that when they are in front of us, they should smile and say hello, welcome to them very clearly. Then to check for danger on the path, we should always look in the four directions. There's only makes common sense there. But again, one is proceeding, of course, being extremely careful that no mental affliction or mentally afflicted thinking takes place.
Yama Rose crossing Jede mobile phone go on. Go motor crossing to the Yama mother and Yaga.
So that's something that may be relevant to us, crossing the road while checking on our mobile phone instead of looking left and right to see, are we going to be taken out by some car or something coming along.
Shiva Ngesu Chita Chawane Zawalesa Ngesu Kane Chitene, Jabi Choso Tawacha, Tunda Jato Tajana,
The fourth of those points is then what to do when we take a rest from all this gazing. And so verse number 37, the end of that, and the beginning of verse number 38. To rest, I should turn my head around and then look behind me. Having examined both ahead and behind, I should proceed to either come or go.
아니 양사소 양 내가 졸람도 딱다도 못다 양들도 못다 따와제는 파도와 양을 투로에 다 잡아라 봐슈그랬어. 어다간제 지금 어떤데 전 다간제 또 개치주에 다 너무 많게 왔제네. 어디 개치주 내고 봐서 다간제 너무 많게 왔죠. 지다소도 일이 줘야다 오해다 제거해도 지금 다 뒤셔도 너무 많게 저 거기에 잘하지 그랬어. 다 소들이 인사리. 다 소시 생무자 좋아 원서 시부시부 다 배들이스와 타이네 다 네가를 너무 게 구해서 너무 많게 와 거기에 잘하지.
So yes, this verse then in when taking a break that we turn the head around and to look back, and to look back without any attachment is important. That there's nothing that is kind of like enticing you to do that, to turn around and look back, but you look back to take a break, and then likewise looking forward again to kind of avoid any danger in front, like a cliff that you might go over, and that so there you make a decision on that basis whether to proceed, to either come or to go. And again, it's just pointing out as well that you know that of course we have to maintain the notion that all of this these kind of instructions here are in order to avoid mental affliction arising. This is the main point here. So whatever you are doing, there's examples of all of this, but I'm saying in all instances and all instructions that again you're able to do all of these things without allowing mental affliction to arise.
답변은 좀 못하다는 쪽으로 좀 못하다는 연구를 가봐 주고 있네. 다 수저 내줘라 조고다 뒤다 쇼도 아니 소소 좋아다 된데는 삽삽 맞이는 심지 먹을 내줘 이거 진짜 못하다는 거는 심지 장래 되고 세게 요래 다 간제 너가 개게 요래 다 네가 그 심로 초아 요가 제네 아니 소소 칼라사에 통에 되게 나 심지 되게 다 지금 가서 망보고 소아체 칼레잖아요 되게 초아 요에 돈에 아니 제 당가 수험받대 심지를 편도가 지기야 심지를 편도가 지기 내 랭게 뒤양아 초에도 심지를 때는 초고도 심지 망보 칼레장 심지 망보 소아체 다 된대글 때네 아니 내 류도 초되기도 근데 초에도 당가 류 초는 게 거바디 가르서 심지 탐제도 산제 고바 줄 랭게 이 아서 칸토도게 아니 지금 산제 공부하게 아니 줄라랍네 아니 두명 배주체네 아니 모자단 도바이네 수 용어를 거뒤 이바이네 심절을 내서 거뒤네 용어들 소소 묘고 삼삼면에 라지고 묘줘야 망고 요구도 왔다 디가 심로 초아요 맞죠 나 초에도 심절을 지금 망고절 때네 가셔 소아체 가셔 깔래자로 초되기도 근데 이번 땅가 초에 가르치고 생각이 랭겐데 심절을 편말 교수부터 맞지긴 있어 왔다 되게 아니 지금 대세 유배타네 너무 강 용용 땅 아니 너무를 갑자기 짠 줘도 있나 그래도 알아서 갑자기 좋아다 홍하다 망고 자오다 다 되게 그 소소 일이 소소 소화계다다 조단 되게 강도도게 안 쳐주베 튕겨를 배주다 안 상도도 딱 타바다 탐지 첨바지 고마도 마담나 타면도 뒤봐도 아니 개월 연작을 심절을 마미와 탐지 자원이네 민도 가서 먼저 삭제가 셈 데레지 줄에 대배 값들 셈절을 뇌내면도 초토에 민도 다 되네 이마다 땅을 상매를 류도 투바이나 땅까지 아니 되네 다 심지를 많이 봐 용도고 되면도 뒤바도 심지를 내 장자리샤 다 뒤에서 아지 딱 강다 치자 딱 뉴언유도 즉 탐제 타반 탐제 기본 공부하지 마다면 타면도 이제 마다바 인바나 거두 이내 심지를 내도 저대 장자지 아지 잠마세 딱 섬스 되는 거 좋아요 봐지 나 동네 용도 쌈 맞아 셴은 너바도 맞서 봐 정하지
So that therefore, whatever we are doing, whatever we are engaging in, whether it's going back and forth, all of the activities that we have to engage in, whether we're driving a car, whether we're engaging in our job or our profession, that we should always have, like in terms of an aside in the mind, that we are aware of the propensity for mental affliction to arise, and therefore we are guarded against that using our mindfulness and alertness. And that's something that's so important, that we have a certain conscientious attitude with regard to that is very, very important. And that, whatever we are engaged in, we're eating and drinking and all activities, that we really try to maintain that motivation, that whatever we are doing is for the benefit, in somehow directly or indirectly to benefit sentient beings. So this is most important, that we are constantly need to remind ourselves that this is our commitment. It's like I'm in the business of benefiting sentient beings, regardless of what I'm doing. And that's the kind of motivation I need to sustain constantly. So why am I sustaining this body, with food and drink and in any other way? I'm doing so in order to best be able to serve the sentient beings. This is the singular and most important reason of why I'm doing this. All the efforts I'm putting into life, the driving of the car and so on. In these situations like that too, you're doing your best to avoid causing any harm driving, but unbeknownst to us and outside of our control, we are certainly harming sentient beings in some way so often. And we have to accept this because we are in this kind of broken realm with a contaminated set of aggregates. And so that's the reality of our situation. So if we had an uncontaminated reality, this would not be the case. And so it's important for us to maintain a sense of feeling with regard to the consequences, known or unknown, of our actions, and not to kind of simply not think about it, but to actually really have a feeling with regard to that there are sentient beings involved here, and that I must be trying to do everything I can to reduce and ultimately eliminate mental affliction, and doing the best I can to include the Dharma as within the motivation for whatever I'm doing. And that's important for us, that very, very important. So it also gives us an extra impetus to understand that I must attain that sense of the uncontaminated, that sense of attaining a state of enlightenment quickly for the benefit of all sentient beings. And that it's not about how I am feeling with regard to this, but it's about not about my suffering, but about not engaging in any harm to other sentient beings, but always trying to benefit them.
어떻게 맞았다 소소 펜스 군란자 아니 되네 아니 마시 뭐 네바데 아니 페베교를 좋아쇼 네바데 페베교를 좋아쇼 페베 통계를 좋아쇼 스타 랑게 네바치 파 네어줘바이는 네바데 심젠디 페베교를 좋아쇼 방고와체네 我去等于虚吧，我的那里真，是吧？他让嘞，这个六八节吧，的确实推荐了就我说，让给马些忙吧，我给写了六八的，的确实推荐了就我说是，让这你个个记得。
So that we maintain this powerful, pervasive mind of benefit at all times. And as pointed out before, even when a sentient being harms us, that we automatically only wish to bring benefit to that sentient being and to dedicate that, if we can't directly do that, dedicate our aspirational mind that this may be a reality as quickly as possible. And if we engage unbeknownst in harm towards a sentient being, and we dedicate also that that harm can actually manifest as benefit for that sentient being as well.
我的来讲的，刚才我的来讲的，落地，我的来讲的，三路当的，这是过去呢，三路的当偏把的当呢，sem见了这个，他说的这个那把给三路的穷的作业，让心给偏把作业三路的让修个用在一起，光修个用在一起过了吧？我的来用过的，我用过的，是吧？别人俺那就大的。刚才的广播式的给全部的多广西用的，本来对吧？这个说的，这落了嘛，说的，本来期间呢 ，Oh my God， 谁多？可是呢，让说个就用这个，广播我用这个是吧？用这个多，感谢这个去开马那个这个中国的他们 ，My God， 谁多？广播我用的多，我倒感觉在这讲的，这个的这个三路的是要广播我用对起。这里中国的你能不能用出来中国的吧？用出来中国的吧？这里要么是穷的主要，真的偏个的话，他超忙我上当。
And so it's about really taking this more kind of like detailed care of the mind to kind of micromanage the mind in that thinking in this way, and again and again and again, that to develop it into such a habit that we are always thinking about what is beneficial for sentient beings. We're always turning harm into benefit for other sentient beings. That we're never allowing mental affliction to hold sway, etc., into such a habit that it becomes automatic, that it becomes natural. That we don't have to even generate a motivation, that it's automatic. Again, is using the example of so many Westerners, when in a situation where they're surprised or shocked, they come out with the exclamation, "Oh my God!" Even for those who don't accept any religious tradition, that somehow God is there when they're shocked and surprised anyway. So it's kind of like that's just natural force of habit. So we have to have that as our kind of knee-jerk mind reaction when faced with any situation, that we have benefit sentient beings, for the benefit of sentient being, and so on. And so this is the kind of way we can do that by again and again and again laying down the same imprint we created into an irresistible habit.
苏巴觉了写了找我你是找我来对的，那个他们就国外现在接不加死。
And so then the third of those subheadings was applying this thinking in other situations. And so the rest of verse number 38 says, being aware of the necessity for such mindful alertness, I should behave like this in all situations.
他中文老说吧，他看这中文东话老说别，对的那个汤节都对的那个汤节都，让些了偏偏国外些吧，真的他底下呢偏个多，底下呢牛个多，的国外些边头呢，偏偏错了就，马偏偏错了，告诉的那边错了，没就过节，我这没就过节呢，我在这结果呢，我在国外写着呢，把他看这个，我走的结果呢是我的，
So this is simply that in all situations, whether coming or going or any other situation, that our mind is filled with the necessity for benefiting self and other in this situation here, that we're just engaging the question of as to what thought is in the mind. Is this is going to help the situation or harm the situation? Is this a harmful thought or is this a beneficial thought? and of course to choose the beneficial.
다 되네 이번에 다 개출했다. 나라도 지금 답변 남바 뒤는 택바 첨부 인생인데 랑 초아디 랑 초에디 산제 공부 중에서 초아지 랑 초에도 지금 미지계에서도 많이 봤잖아요. 랑 초에디 산제 공부 중에서도 초아지 그러나 산제 공부 중에서도 뒤 규중에서도 초아지 안 뒤져봐 얘는 아니 사회 통해 그거 최차봤다. 그 초아를 통계도 고를 가서 상적의 류인반에서 상적의 류를 봐배 통계도 고르와.
So therefore, for us, then as Buddhists, as supposed Mahayana Buddhists, that our feeling, our automatic feeling, is not necessarily that oh, I have a human life, but rather that this human life is my purpose is to attain enlightenment for the benefit of sentient beings, and that's what I'm here for. That's the purpose here, and so to attain that, I need to take care to have that motivation in everything I do, in eating, drinking, going, coming, whatever I'm engaged in. It's a commitment, it's necessary for me to habituate to that thinking, to attain that goal.
我大体的是过去过来偏把当莫浪出去教，跟偏把当莫浪出去教，俺白准节，俺刚土都个白准节，莫浪出去教，俺好多都得给老板是偏把八十多个，你把早年的几个面试，俺给的马上我你把的偏偏就是就说是吧？我的这个别人他把呢，我这位，隔离这兄弟贴的话，兄弟贴的。
So we really have to kind of go from deep down in the heart to really search deep down to kind of go, okay, I'm going to throw everything at this. This is it. I've got to engage in the practice for that which I can't achieve now. I'm making aspirational prayers to gain the energy to be able to do that. I'm putting in the maximum amount of effort. I'm bringing with it the kind of mindfulness and alertness that will deal solely in benefit and never in harm. And even if I am through my own ignorance and awkwardness, I engage in harm where I was hoping for benefit, and I pray that this may be actually ultimately beneficial and not harmful. And so this is the kind of thinking that we kind of constantly should habituate to.
다 시바 네베 군줄라 따와니서 따와니 자와레 류기 대다 내자데 자와 도네 데네니 가서 류디 지다부로 네바 이제 따와 잤음.
And so then when we are keeping the body still, what is it that we should do? Verse number 39. Once having prepared for an action with a thought, my body will remain in such a way. Then periodically I should look to see how the body is being maintained.
다 되베 체나야 답변은 지금 저다 되베 체나야 류대다 내가 자고다 소소게 지 레다 간제 전세가 수네 다들 소소 류그 된데 내기에서 된데바 진네들 대다이들 류기 대다 내가 자고셔 삼대 류기 자와 또네 다 류기가 디가서데 군제들로 또네 되네네 갑갑서 류기 줄람 대다부 내가 인시 따와 자고다 그 다 가자 지금 가서 전세가 소액이 다 장바 제소 주와 다 어떤 진다 지금 류디 가서 다 가자 지금 소수 지금 삼류기 내제당 내가 삼류기 나로라 베다 지금 추도 봐 제소 주와다 지다고 내가 인시 따와 저거
And so here saying when we're still or when we are sitting again to examine the body, again, of course, you're employing mindfulness and alertness here to both set the body and then to constantly engage in the checking process to see that the body is remaining in the position that you have put it.
我的他感觉这个六个那个原本的哪个那个原本的一个那个原本六个一送给他这个他不能他不能六当哪一个按你这个讲话了这个讲话了学别在按你一个按你这个觉得这么多个按你这个个是加了节点加了的按你大概你一个告诉样我的古龙节当的三路当的按这么中国的过加了节的大概这个这个说的这个说广把这个马这个파도这个电开话就马用个파도 그뒤呢加了哎感觉真的个让数个抓点中国吧让数个抓点中国吧我大这个大感觉就落了工地的一个工地的工作我这是
So really, it's again reinforcing that point. Whatever actions we do with the body, with the speech, with the mind, that we bring to it, this mindfulness and alertness, is so important. And that when we are doing actions of body and speech, that we are first of all checking in the mind, checking that motivation in the mind to see is it in accord with the Dharma, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say. And indeed, this is what leads all the actions of body and speech. This kind of analysis to be really refining motivation at all times to see that it is a positive course of action, and that again to maintain that constancy of approach, and we are persistent in that. We are going to develop a very positive habit that at one point will become natural. So we don't have to wrestle with motivation. It naturally will settle into that which is most positive.
这个的课程也就学吧，各对呢，这个东方那个多大的样呢，样都少，另外个叫我跟着本来六个带当这个的，有点呢嘛就把这个的也不接。那呢没就把这个的什么当，那呢没就把这个，那也得那个有的，因为有点呢得然后做没把去，俺跟着说有点呢，对上面做没把去，有点呢，然后个对上面做没把去，但有当的干的是呢，点的中啊去，点的中啊因把一张，有点的做啥要嘛的，可有点的做没啊，可对于呢，东把那个穿了，可对于呢什么当多去。这个对让数个列图去，大概我等的真的，但是搞完呢，东半年的搞完呢加注了吧，可是呢，却他们在有点的嘛，主要因为因啥，却他们在电的中啊，因为因啥，我当这个的更加本来就专业这个的专业，过抓的、文化的、对吧的，这个更加这个让完的准备对吧去，让完的准备抓去。让完的准备对吧？起码呢，各地的电的主要处理个嘛的，主要这个大概这个说的让完的主要呢，各地的主要用过的，过让完的主要当的，让完的主要呢，可是主要是呢，让完的主要呢，他各地的主的这个去，电的嘛重要去，让完主要呢，个电过来吃个有嘛。我的让完的准备，大概这让完的嘛准备各家的我怎么，各家的我怎么样呢？东把你时间得了，过去全部约定去。让完的嘛准备因为这个电的主要的外面这些事，我的东把这个国家的样都少了，各把一呢加出来，各把一呢啥也同业，做到往的年，各把一呢加出来，啥的嘛这各对呢东把你给错了，别国家的。什么当的？国家的什么专业情况吧？什么专业情？专业情。过中间是了什么当么个钱呢？过这个让先给马主把的，个是让给马主把的，东半年的是不是？国外的没把的什么国外的，东半年的什么的，电的中华的是国土去，电的中华的是让给马主把的国土去。过度就没了，他电话，第二天呢，查单个老手冲的抓起，的这刚才我们说呢，他第二个这的让到个业务上，等呢， 검자는 검증을 넣게 하는데 아니 돈이 무엇도 또 되는 너무 구조화를 잡서매 거로다.
So as I pointed out previously as well, that it's so important to bring the doctrine of emptiness into this equation as well, that, to always remind ourselves that the body that is about to engage in such an action and so on is lacking any objective existence, that it is something that does not exist in the way that it appears. It is not a self-powered entity. That how does it exist then? It exists in dependence. It arises in dependence, and that this is so important, that we are able to constantly see the world through the vision of emptiness. That this is something that is not absent from indeed anything that we are doing, so that it arises again naturally. It's so habituated to that it becomes our go-to thought whenever, wherever we are, because all phenomena lack that objective existence, and they completely lack that self-poweredness. They lack any independent existence. And so because if they did have that self-poweredness, they would remain so without the possibility of any change. They have to be like that all the time. It just doesn't stand to reasons. It's an absurd situation to be in. So it's so important to become familiar with the object of negation, to understand that this is an impossibility for existence, that the phenomena cannot exist in that situation. That phenomena, when we again and again and again bring this to mind, we will see that all phenomena are dependent. They must arise independent. And so this kind of dependent origination or dependent arising is so important for us to become familiar to. The more we bring it to bear on all of our lives, whether we're going or coming, eating, drinking, even in the most mundane things that we are doing, we allow the profundity of that understanding to sink deeper and deeper. We get a more subtle and more profound understanding of what emptiness is all about. And that understanding that emptiness is not indicative of a lack of existence, but rather it is that which implies how phenomena can and only can exist, and that is arising in dependence. And if we have that clearly in our heads, then the prevalence of attachment and aversion arising in our minds will be greatly reduced. And the less attachment and aversion that we have in our reactions to all life, the less opportunity there is for mental affliction to arise.
What the Kankala Channel and Chikupananga Chulo, Chamja Dogin, the shopping center, Dogana Kaba Dogin, what the got some of the Kapaina, what that you didn't a Mado or Nala because now you didn't do one now than me too, but the Katu in there, Samotana, shopping center, going to cover coffee tongue, and some of the dead. Coffee tongue, Kibu chair, and some of the day done, you didn't a Matuba ticket bar, and you didn't a Matuba tea, then, and it's because that could have a church, not so much, and because I Charwich could have not so much a Charwich thought, they could demolish you good water. Take a girl, round the Matuba, you must a tiller tenner, and a tenner to my image, and because of the Chaminda, the nephew, Minda, Chatigan. That Rawa Matua Taka Rangi ten young ticket. Rawa the Duba Yimba, tap him with what and young for him to. That when they done that Sangi John de Sumatra, Tamunet and a Kojichubujuati. Kojichubujuat, the tap out to Gurata, till 10.
So, therefore, whatever we are doing, that we going for a stroll or going to the shopping center, that we are, acutely aware that phenomena are appearing to us in a certain way, but they don't exist in the way that they appear. So the way that we perceive phenomena as they appear is not in accordance with the way they actually exist. And we make that constant connection with whatever we're doing, like we're in a cafe having a coffee. We're happy enough with our delicious coffee, but we're thinking, this is something that lacks any objective existence, that this is only arising all in dependence, that all around me, all conventional phenomena appear in a certain way to exist, but they do not exist in the way that they appear. They are arising in dependence. They are dependent arisings. And so to exist is self-powered as the way that they appear is an impossibility, because if that was the case, then nothing could be possible. Nothing could happen in that sense. There would be a static reality. It is blatantly untrue and impossible that phenomena, for their very possibility, must arise in dependence. And so that's again to reminding ourselves too that this very doctrine is really the jewel in the crown of all of what the Buddha taught. Is really amazing, and that this familiarity with emptiness, this emptiness of all phenomena, empty of being, arising in the way that they appear, even though we are operating at the level of imagination now, kind of like we're really just informing ourselves of that, but it is that which is, the quintessential act of Dharma, is to be able to kind of remind ourselves that phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear, and then to establish that they do exist. They have a valid way of existing, and that is arising in dependence. Yes. Again, I was saying yes to in that moment where you have that sort of understanding for a brief moment, even in your imagination, to induce a sense of bliss which combines with voidness, and to engage in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness, is laying down a very definite and powerful imprint to realize just what you're imagining now. And when you are engaged in that sort of analysis, and you bring forth the combination of bliss and wisdom meditation like that, there is no greater offering that you could make to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Very efficient, cost nothing, best possible offering you could give. What more could you ask for?
Save money. What
So we leave it there for today.
and the quadle top matana tam the calling ever to enjoy some of them, and a day rangi chiwala pematama javachi so some such and a chinang chok condition you then a tomata do some your mari because you then a druba yimbina got then jung some ever chat over it. Got then a young good one. Then you want to cut the data because you didn't want to data. So what did the conversation and do some of your money something you have a lot you make you when you do sometimes. Then that in you might use that's in the time you get to the Sunday combat to pay your tap to tell what then the join in by and the country the conversion assembly time you to the Sunday combat to be. But on the time of the new one, you do to watching some compassion, did directing when Yakon has to so that then and the Pandits are Lama of Target you and Kusu to send it to because we never potential Sunday Guamato for the chance to count.
So then we start the dissolution process by, first of all, establishing an appropriate seating arrangement on our own crowns for the invitation of the Guru Buddha in the space in front. And this begins with a contemplation on renunciation, in understanding the nature of this reality we are in, cyclic existence, being in the nature of suffering, that there's only possibility of getting out of this reality, of getting definite emergence from this suffering reality. And so renunciation it comes to mind, and from that thought arises the lotus mandala seat on our crown. And then from an understanding that all external and internal phenomena they are do not exist in the way that they appear, that they are dependent phenomena and therefore can in no way exist objectively. From that arises the sun disk mandala seat. And that this very dependence, the fact that all phenomena arise in dependence, it makes it possible for me to attain the state of enlightenment. Therefore, I can have that motivation to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And this brings forth the moon disk mandala seat. And so that we make our prayer at that point to be able to quickly attain that state of enlightenment. And then the invocation verse to invite the Guru Buddha to that seat. We recite this 3 times. Glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainment of body, speech, and mind. At the end of that recitation, the figure of Guru Buddha begins the journey from the space in front. At the end of the second recitation, arrives to sit on the pre-prepared seat. And at the end of the third recitation, we have the certainty that the Buddha will remain there until we attain enlightenment. And at that point, we have a spontaneous burst of rejoicing.
我的他要不就说三节光嘛，都不结束，等那养了多，明天这么配的。如果都搁这加上我的最小，我就是我他们叫我的，他们那个讲究起我30岁全是不的，如果上一两个人那么的了嘛，你看他也不是养了多，明天的这么配，我的那些，我都感觉我的那些，你等那他感觉这个大概说那些钱的，他感觉样，他说的。 严重恐怕些，安尼等那个落地让给你的白马大学起来就说上山去，安尼等那多把你恐怕这看上他，其他个巧克力有点做对上要嘛的，甚至恐怕些，我的那个也被落地，我可说的，但是你们中国人讲就是甚至他们就是3节公文，你嘛都他把这个上山落去给，安尼等那个对嘛的。 大概就我讲讲说，等到8点这个，那么这不是大概你个别么就可能像工作途中我都差不多，虽然这话的大表告诉拍，虽然你别告诉修，虽然顺便告诉他3节公嘛都把它接说什么，那等到别嘛的嘛，你别嘛大家嘛看出那边人家到来在多这个不，这个不吃个这个看见，俺的他我都大概对别成了带动不能，等到。 就是咱们两个说，我马上把这那的，我们也他妈也都让他们，这个那的说什么送过这个，我的这个恐怕些。
And at this point, then we offer the seven-limbed practice and the mandala offering. And then also we now prepare to invite the Guru Buddha down to our own heart center. But first, we must establish a suitable seat there. Again, going through the contemplation on renunciation to give rise to the lotus mandala seat, and then thinking about all internal and external phenomena again, and having in no way any objective existence, even at the atomical level, that they are completely lacking any inherent existence and must arise in dependence, and that this then allows them to the sun disk mandala seat to be placed, and this dependence then is promoting the possibility of attainment of enlightenment, independence upon creating the necessary causes. And this makes it possible for us to have that motivation to quickly attain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of sentient beings. And this brings forth the moon disk mandala seat. And again, we recite the invocation verse thrice. O glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the beginning, at the end of the first recitation, the figure moves down through the crown chakra, down through our central channel. And at the end of the second, arrives at the pre-prepared seat. And at the end of the third, we have that certainty again that the Buddha will remain until we attain enlightenment. And so rejoice at that possibility. Then the petals of the lotus fold over the central figure and are sealed at their tips by a white five-pronged semi-vajra. Then they're surrounded or wrapped by three mantras. The first being the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha, going around in a clockwise direction. And secondly, the mantra of Manjushri, going around in an anti-clockwise direction. And thirdly, the mantra of dependent origination, going around in a clockwise direction.
What did it? And Rangi Yuso, and the Labashaja Sangi, and sure the Kusun to the part of my Rangi, Kadi Balo, the Central Balatena, and Toma Mevan, the Dibata Kabatu, Takaja, Caso de Takaja, Sochua, Machima, Misawa, Tutum, Majanda, there's a lot of Takaja. Shebe Kanamato, Rajan Kanamato, Yava continued son, Setia, Tsengama, Dingama, Toma members of Dibata, Javu, such. And how do the Takaja, Soda, Tomataka, Jajus, Lamataka, Sanga, Tazitaka, Padamalama, Guba, Table Lovel, Toasama, Kujos, Neve Legua, Tabe Chebon, Papa Judolo Kuata, Simjala Neve Legua, Tupamijiva, so Daigiva, Shengiva, Jesu, Tona, Tori the Tabe Jesu, you are called and Jesu, you know, such Jabata, but Jachetama Josu, such.
And that then from within the petals, the Guru Buddha emanates countless rays of light emanating from the heart center, permeating through the petals, permeating through every single atom of our body, from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet, and purifying all negativities and obscurations that we have accumulated since beginning this time in general, and particularly dealing with all of the negativities we have accumulated from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, from lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle gossip, from covetousness, malicious intent, and wrong view, all of the naturally occurring negativities or those actions proscribed by the Buddha, all of the negativities that we have accumulated in this life, in the life previous to this one, in the previous one to that, and going back all the way to beginning this time, and to also any infractions, downfalls related to Pratimoksha vows, Bodhisattva vows, or Tantric vows, all of the actions that we have done, such as showing disrespect to our parents, right up to disrespecting our gurus, also actions such as abandoning of the Dharma at any point, in any category, in any type of way, of the actions that negative actions that we have engaged in ourselves, that we have incited others to do, that we have rejoiced in the doing of. Any kind of negativity whatsoever, along with the imprints of those negativities, are completely and utterly purified. And then all of what can be create an obstacle to our engaging in spiritual practice, being physical illness or disease, likewise mental instability and disease, that all imbalances of our elements, of the channels, winds and drops, that these are all eradicated and rebalanced. And also particularly the biggest obstacle to our quickly being able to attain enlightenment being that of ordinary view. That this attitude is transformed into having pure view. And then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of Buddha. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. And now I see my body, speech, and mind as being inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened being. The place I am in is also transformed of all thought and becomes the celestial abode of an enlightened being. And then through the of really seeing my own self as an enlightened being, knowing that likewise I do not exist in the way that I appear. I send out countless light rays equal in number to all the sentient beings in all the 3 realms of existence. And upon dissolving into them in the same moment, they are transformed of all fault and arise as fully enlightened beings. And likewise, the place that they are in is purified of all fault and becomes the celestial abode of enlightened beings. And then this brings forth a sense of bliss, which combines with voidness. And I see, that first of all, I see this is kind of lacking any objective existence. It's merely imputed by thought, that the virtue, that the leading of all these sentient beings to a state of enlightenment, that the virtue that has underwritten that progress towards enlightenment, that myself as the agent of that virtue, all lack any objective existence, and it's merely imputed by thought. From this understanding brings comes bliss, which combines with voidness. And again, I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. Today is the day I've led all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment. That's wonderful. I rejoice. So I know I'm acting at the level of imagination now, but I make a sincere and powerful dedication that quickly I may make this manifest for sure. So, David, just to remind you, in case you don't know, there's a continuation of this meeting, so please don't end the meeting. Okay. There's a meeting with the Dharma School directly now. Okay. You are Alertness, great treasure of compassion, not aimed at true existence, and Manjustri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, Losang Drakpa, at your feet I make requests.
That's all. Oh, yeah.